Hence, you can see there really is a distribution of wealth element in that. In the Philippines, CCTs are funded by borrowings. So that immediately wipes out the entire, one of the most important parts of the CCTs, which is a distribution of wealth. So we have to rethink some policies. Anyone who has made even a cursory examination of any economy and its reactions and its policies towards poverty will know that direct transfer payments, i.e. throwing money at the problem, simply doesn't work. Hence the very famous Chinese saying about fishes. Don't give me a fish, teach me how to fish. And this is what we must do. We must give people the opportunity to make it better for them. How do we do that? The very beginning of that entire process, improve our educational system. With a well-trained, well-experienced workforce, you can do anything. And that will provide opportunities for people. That, again, if there are more high school graduates, there are more college graduates, literacy rate is improved. And in this day and age, our command of the English language is important. Because for better or for worse, that is the language of the internet, that is the language of commerce. All of those things we must provide as a service of government. And I have always believed in the principle that education is the most important service that government provides its people. And that is just the beginning point. Now, then you must, again, have faith in your own economy. And that you invest in it. You invest in your own economy. Because when you invest in roads, when you invest in transport systems, when you invest in power plants, you are not investing in an economy. You're investing in your people. Because you are making an investment to provide your people with an opportunity, with a framework in which they can flourish. Look at Filipinos abroad. When given the opportunity, they were, and knowing what the rules that are stable, you work hard, you do well, and with a bit of luck, you'll make it. And look at them. They make it. Filipinos make it. And we are not only successful, we are actually sought out because of the good work that we do. That all else being equal, they will choose a Filipino over another nationality. With such an asset, I cannot understand why we are in the doldrums when it comes to job creation, when it comes to the quality of life issues that we are facing. And can you imagine the 8 million Filipinos, all their skill and industry and resourcefulness that we are all famous for? Can you imagine bringing them all back to the Philippines? Can you imagine the contribution that they will make to nation building, to our progress? That is something that we really have to do, is to understand that government is here to provide a framework for the private sector to flourish. And there are many ways to do that. Some simple, some more complicated, but nevertheless, that should be the job as we see it, in terms of the partnership that we are asking the private sector to join in with government. On the tax structure, it will have to depend. The fiscal policy always depends on the industrialization policy, the investment policy of any country. I was a little bit surprised to hear in the SONA that our manufacturing sector was vibrant. I am still, to this point, trying to find where that vibrant manufacturing sector exists. So, but that is something that I believe we should be attending to. We don't make anything anymore. And the most successful economy in the last 10, 15 years has been an economy based on making things. China, they make everything. And that is what we should try to learn those lessons.
My main question is mainly about DOT, and I second the guy about talking about EDSA. We have EDSA in the air and also on maritime. You are in charge of the administration at this point.
Sorry, but what's your question?
The question is about the aviation side. We have so much investment, and also on the maritime side. So we're not respecting our ecology as far as transportation towards our island. If you are in a position, are we going to change developing structure of our aviation commercial?
It comes back again to infrastructure, to public investment. just to take up your subject on aviation. If you remember, a few years back, the goal was to reach 10 million tourists a year. Actually, it may sound like a large number, but it is small compared to other countries. But that was the goal. Many observers have noticed that we are stuck at 4.5 million and have been stuck at that simply because we do not have the capacity to bring more people in. We do not have the infrastructure, we do not the software even for the tourism industry. The shortage in capacity does not only affect the tourism industry, but all kinds of commerce. The amount of money that was lost because of the port congestion, because of the having to transport what was supposed to go into Manila, the people in Demoraje daw is more expensive than the actual cost of all the materials that they were bringing in. To the point that the ships would simply, after waiting a week, turn around and drop them off in Hong Kong. I was talking to one of the operators and I was saying, why don't you increase the flights to this place, to that place? And they said the department of the DOTC has told them, Cebu Pac is allowed 200 flights a day. That's it. If you're going to add flights to one place, you have to remove flights from another place. So we have reached that plateau. And if we are going to increase capacity, we have to build better infrastructure. The development is not going quickly enough for us to take full advantage of what should be a country that is in the middle of the so-called emerging markets. And the rest of the world is looking to us for our vibrance and our progress. We are not playing as big a part in that as we could be, if only we would recognize the importance of public investment. And it is a little bit, again, confusing when we hear our economic managers boasting about the retained earnings of the government. If you have large retained earnings in the government, you are not doing your job. It is the job of government not to have a big bank balance, but to provide service. Of the appropriated funds for last year's budget, 400 billion pesos remains unspent. Now, how can you possibly have a good delivery of services to the people if 400 billion pesos of your appropriated funds in your budget remains unspent? It is not a point of pride, it should be a point of failure and be recognized as such. I think it's the policymakers that really have to readjust their way of thinking. One of the problems that the PPP was one of the reasons it's become a fundraising exercise. Yung palakihan ng subsidy. The PPPs are not there to provide income for the government. The PPPs are there to provide a service to the people. This is a very strange approach to the PPP, and it's something that we are going to remove from the process in the rewriting of the PPP law.
Assuming that you run and elected, you mentioned about decreasing the income tax rate for businesses, but what about for individuals? Would you support a bill or would you certify this version of revisiting or lowering the income tax rates for individuals in the income tax bracket? As you might be aware, among the ASEAN neighbors, we're the highest, if not one of the highest. I think insofar as the highest income tax bracket that we have of 500,000 are taxed at 32, as opposed to our neighbors in Thailand, their 30% is 5 million pesos, in Singapore is 20%. And if you would support that, what would be your countermeasure to be able to make up for the forgone revenue?
It is something actually that we're starting to do now. What has happened is because the categories were written into the tax code a long time ago. And many people who you would not consider to be in the middle class have now found themselves in that. And those people who you would not have considered to be in A or B have found themselves in that sector. We simply have to redefine those categories because those categories are no longer, the way that the tax code is written and the way that the categories have been defined is no longer relevant. What has happened is that we have left the process of redefining very late, and that's why we have found ourselves in this position where those who actually should not be taxed in such a high tax category find themselves in the tax category, when in fact, when you look at the total income distribution, they are maybe at the lower end, but they are paying taxes that are more appropriate for those who are closer to the higher end of the category. It is something that we have recognized and we are trying to fix, but putting those absolute numbers and picking them so that they are relevant for as long as possible has turned out to be more complicated than we had thought. But again, there are many lessons that we can learn from our neighbors and from our competitors.
You mentioned a while ago that subsidy is not something good for the country, and for all we know, most of the ASEAN partners are in a very big subsidy in terms of their energy delivery. With the bill now in place and being implemented, do you see any other improvement or any other option for us to bring down the rates of electricity, given the influx of technology, the renewable energies, and other sorts of relevant things related to the energy sector?
The sad thing is that the IPIRA law, with its attempt to make the power sector more efficient and to allow privatization to come in, what has been the actual effect in its implementation is the raising of the cost to the consumer of electricity. So I think we have to rethink that, and the regulation at the other end, in other words, after privatization, be improved. So many costs that really are not rightly passed on to the consumer are being passed onto the consumer. There have been additional costs for the consumer to pay for upcoming projects. Now, how is that? How can you possibly justify charging a consumer a higher cost for a project that has not yet even been started? The capital investment should not come from consumers; it must come from the corporation. So, this kind of unintended consequence are some of the things that we really need to address. The question of power generation, distribution, and transmission has been something that has bedeviled the Philippine economy for a while, and that I think has been due to a lack of forward planning. We are reactive rather than proactive, but even in that sense we react very, very slowly. Hence the constant 8-hour plus brownouts in Mindanao, the 3 to 4 hours in Visayas, and the constant threat of the same brownouts here in Luzon. We have to increase our capacity, but to fix the capacity to generate. But we have to also fix the system at the distribution level. And when I mean distribution, I mean at the electrical cooperative level. Much of the costs that go into the cost of current are really there because of the relationship of the cooperatives with NAPOCOR. The very liberal provision of debt by the NAPOCOR, I guess because of their dealings over the last 20 years, the whole system has changed, and what has happened is that the NAPOCOR and the cooperatives simply feel that they'll never have to pay any of these debts anyway. And so utang ng utang, passing on the costs to the consumer, and no increase, no betterment in the efficiency of the distribution. Actually, one of the proponents of the rural electrification is right here, Congresswoman Marcos. She was the one who headed with General Dumol the rural electrification program. The function of the cooperatives has changed so much. It has become again a political entity. They are not really that interested in efficiency. They are not interested in business. Rather than holding position and trying to make as much money as they can out of the cooperative, which is contrary, anathema, to the entire conception of the rural electrification program. The energy sector is a very complicated one, and it is something that we have to leave to experts.
What is your plan in the mining industry?
Let us look at the example of Australia. Australia is one of the few countries in the world, Australia and I think Indonesia, that never suffered from the global recession, from the global financial crisis, because of its mining industry. And that's the potential that we have. With China, of course, buying up everything, not only in terms of energy, but also in mineral commodities, mineral wealth. There is very much a ready market there. However, the main concerns for mining is because of the horror stories that we have suffered. The regulation of the mining it basically comes down to that. The protection of the environment, the protection of the ecology, the fair share of profits at the local level. As governor, I was astounded one day on my way to work to see that they were setting up a hole. They were building roads, they were cutting down trees. They said, "What's going on? I don't know anything about this, and who gave you permission to do this?" And it was a mining concern, and they were going to dig exploratory holes. It did not recognize the part that local government plays and the local community plays, and the importance of being a good neighbor. So all these kinds of things have really put us against mining, simply because we feel, certainly at the local level, that it has not been fair to the communities where those mining concerns are. Not only because of the share in profits, not only because of the lack of consultations with the local communities, but also because of the potential damage to the environment. I am not saying that it is with a wave of a hand that we will solve all those problems, but we must also recognize the great potential that mining has for us. Because of China's demand for all of these products, the prices for all of these mineral goods has been very good for many years now. And some of those mines which had been closed because they were deemed unprofitable, now, if you crunch the numbers, are profitable again. So there is a great deal of potential. So it's in a sense a high risk, high return operation. You can get it right and make a lot of money out of it, bring lots of improvements to the local communities and to the national economy. But at the same time, if you are not careful, you can cause a great deal of damage that will take many generations to correct. It is something that must be regulated very, very closely. But again, it is not something that it is an opportunity for the national economy that we cannot afford to pass up either.
Nowadays, Filipinos have a harder time to travel and with their passport, their visas. Is there something that you can do as a future president? It's one question, to change that. Two is the usury laws in financing, and hard for people to borrow money where interest rates are higher than most countries.
That is a question on the monetary policy. That is something that, again, we have to be more, I believe, more liberal. Being debt averse is a healthy intuition, is a healthy instinct. However, we cannot maximize what we have without leveraging it with other sources of funds. And so, but again, this has been the investment policy of the central bank. It is perhaps a reaction to play safe because of all the problems that we have seen, where we got to the point, at least not in the Philippines, but in other highly evolved and complicated economic systems, where we got to the point where risk no longer had any cost. That's why we ended up with the subprime problem. That's why we ended up with this whole situation where the buying and selling of debt ended up putting us in a place where we simply did not understand what the system was doing any longer. That's why the great fall of the huge investment banks was not anticipated by anyone. And up to this day, we have not yet seen the explanation as to why it happened. Maybe it's parts of it, but not, I think, for the entire global. It has become so complex. But again, that is, I think, why the monetary policy of the central bank has been such. What was the first question again?
Visas, the ability to be able to travel. Easier.
Actually, when I first started traveling, when I first started going to school abroad, the countries in which Filipinos work had a very liberal policy towards us going in and out, for workers especially to come in and out. The problem was the tendency for us to overstay and to become undocumented workers in their economy. As a matter of fact, in Europe, there used to be, in most of the EU, no need for a visa for a Filipino if you are going to stay less than a month. On the other hand, I know many Filipinos who would stay for 28 days, just leave the country and come back and start their month again. And this kind of abuse led actually the Philippine government is the one that asks that there be a more stringent policy towards immigration, towards emigration, towards foreign workers coming in. The root of the problem is that there are no jobs in the Philippines. Kaya tayo may TNT. In places like Italy, for example, the number of undocumented Filipinos is equal to the number of the documented workers. So in any European country, you say, ilan undocumented dyan? 60,000 Filipinos. That's 120,000 Filipinos, in fact. That is why we have had to request other countries to be more strict, because it is to the detriment of those workers who are working legally. You know, I'm a Filipino. I quite understand why they do it. There are no jobs here. The ultimate answer, again, is to create jobs. How do you do that? You make the economy grow. How do you make the economy grow? You make public investments in the economy. And that's the only way. And you make your systems more efficient. You make government interfere as little as possible, but as much as is necessary in all business activities. It is a general concept. Again, the application to practical problems is not necessarily obvious, but it is still something we need.